We are going to start by actually building our own very small module. The reason is we want to introduce the concepts and then we'll take a step back, break them down and come to understand how they're actually working. So let's build a module in Node. I'll start off with an empty app.js file, and this time I'm going to add a second file, another .js file. I'll just call it greet.js. And I'll just set it in the same folder at the same level as my app.js file. My greet file will be my first module, that is my first set of JavaScript code designed to be independent from the other code and yet working in tandem with it. Something I can reuse, something I can use in other Node programs, and it's a way for me to keep my code structured, a way to make it more easy to manage as it grows, and even for other developers who are coming in perhaps new to the same project, to make it easier for them to understand and find where the code is. So this greet.js file will be my first module, and I'm just going to have console.log hello. Very simple. And here's my app.js file, and I'm gonna go ahead to terminal, and I'm just gonna run node app.js. Now what do you think is going to happen? Well, greet.js file is in the same folder, but that doesn't matter because all I'm doing is pointing Node at the app.js file and telling it to run it. I haven't pulled my module into my app.js file. In order to do that, I'm going to use a function called require. Actually, Node.js makes the require available inside this JavaScript core. And require is a function. What you pass to the function, the argument, the parameter is a string, and the string contains the location or the name of the module that you wish to import, or that is used here in this app.js file. In one JS file, you can require another, and the term require makes sense. I need this, I require this in my app. So please Node go get and this module for me. So I make a string, and then I will say greet.js. I've made my own module, and we'll see more of this later. So I need to tell Node where it is essentially. And that means that the / that I'll put on it means this is the same location as the JavaScript file that I'm sitting right now at the same folder level. And then I look for greet.js, and that's it. Let's start there. So I've required, and I've given the require function. I've invoked the require function, and I've given it a string telling it the name of the file where my module lives. So let's try this again here, node app.js, and there it is, the console.log ran. This means Node grabbed this file and executed the JavaScript file, pushed it through the V8 engine in its own custom code, and it ran, just like that. That, in a sense, is our first module. But let's look at something interesting. Let's suppose that I go back to my module, and instead I'm going to wrap this in a function. So we'll use a function expression var greet equals to function. So now I have a greet function. Now I can invoke the greet function here. And let's run it again, node app.js. So I'll have a greet function that will do the console.log, and then I'll invoke it. So that should still work, and it does. But now app.js file has loaded this module. Does that mean I can call greet from app.js? What do you think? Do you think that will work? Let's try it. Node app.js. No, greet is not defined. This is by design. Remember, we said that a module should not only encapsulate code, but it should make sure that the code that's in the module doesn't accidentally or unintentionally affect the rest of the code in the application. The code inside grid.js is protected. App.js doesn't simply have access to it unless I want it to. It can't go get its variables, its functions, its objects. We would have to explicitly make that available, and we'll see how. But for starters, this is a good thing. I could declare a variable in this JS file and a different variable in different JS file of the same name, and they won't collide with each other. They won't override each other. The module is self-contained. Now, what if I did want to make the greet function available to app.js? How can I do that? Well, Node.js provides a way to do this. In my module, I can simply type module.exports. This is a special variable, a special object, a special place to put things that I want to make available to anything else that uses this module. And only thing that I attach to this will be made available. So I choose what becomes available outside of my module for us. So I could simply say equals greet, for example. Now this module is exposing the greet function. It's making it available for use outside of the module. So how can I use this in my app.js file? Well, I can actually set a variable var greet equal to the result of the function. So the require function will return module exports. So I can just call it the same name if I want, or I could call this in a different name. I'll just call it greet for consistency. Now I should be able to call greet because I have my own variable greet. The set equal to the result of require, and require will give me back whatever I've attached to module exports to my module. So Node.js says, oh, you want the greet file? It runs it and then gives me back whatever I've attached to this special phrase, module.exports. I've attached this greet function so that will get set there. Remember, functions are first class, so I can set them equal to a variable and then invoke the function using that variable name. So if I run this, it works. Here, hello. And I should also remove this call to see hello once. I've saved the file, and let's run the file again. And here it is, hello. So I exposed the greet function in the module and then used what was exposed, like getting the value from the require function. It's pretty interesting, isn't it? What's also kind of neat is I can actually remove this .js. Node.js require function is smart enough to know that if I'm asking for a module, it most likely is a JavaScript file because this is a Node.js we are talking about. So I could run this node app.js. It still works. It knew that when I said greet here, I actually mean greet.js. So I can just leave off the .js extension. It isn't necessary. So you might be asking yourself, well, where did require and module exports, where did those come from? Well, they're defined inside JavaScript core. Then you might ask, well, how did it become available to my JavaScript file, and how is it that the module protects my variables, my code that I don't have access to them outside the module, unless I explicitly expose it with module.exports? Well, actually there is a few variables going on. Let's go ahead and go into the module, and I'll run it with a breakpoint here at module.exports. Let's launch it. There, now I want you to notice something. Let me just expand this window. Okay, here are all the variables available to me right now. Obviously, there is the greet function. I created that, but there is also module require and exports, dir name and file name. Where did those come from? This variable always is set up and available for me, but that's a V8 JavaScript engine. The JavaScript itself, the ECMAScript standard, the specification says that there should be this keyword, which can mean different things depending on what function and what code you're running. But this is always available. However, require, module, exports, file name and dir name, those aren't part of the ECMAScript specification. They aren't part of JavaScript and they're available to me here even though I haven't typed them into my code. What do they do exactly and where do they come from? Understanding how modules really work will help you to write better ones and help you to see all the patterns that you can use and organize in your code in a clean and reusable way. So that's what we're going to see next. We're going to see exactly how modules and require work in Node.js.